Hello, YouTube viewers. Welcome to my channel, CCM Drummer. My name is Matthew Jackson. And in today's video, I would like to respond to a two-part video series that was done by a gentleman by the name of Michael Kupris. He has a YouTube channel called Become the Knight. And the knight is spelled with a K. It's like the knight that wears armor. Okay. So yeah, Become the Knight. He's established quite a video channel for him, or YouTube channel for himself. He's got over 174,000 subscribers. Not bad. That's very good. Over 33 million views. That's excellent. And he's uploaded a total of 573 videos. He joined YouTube in February of 2015. He goes, his AKA is Mike the Music Snob. That's his AKA. He has a Bachelor of Science in Communications Media, and he lives in Nashville. He is a guitar player, and he's a member of a band called Crusade. And basically, his YouTube channel consists of being a music critic, talking about guitars. He does have a song by his group called Insatiable that just came out recently. So yeah, and I think he's eminently qualified to criticize music or be a music critic because he's in the music business himself. Now, the two videos that I want to respond to in this video, the first one is exposing Christian contemporary music, the 7 deadly sins, and this is part 1. And this was uploaded on May 27th, 2021. And that video was for 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 26 seconds. Now, the video, it's the sequel to that, which is part 2. It's called Christian Music, the Culture of Manipulation and Silence. That was uploaded on June 2nd, 2021. That video is 1 hour and 1 minute and 52 seconds. So he spent, if you combine the times of both videos, we're looking at 2 hours, 6 minutes, 18 seconds. So yeah, he was talking about Christian music, CCM, and worship music. Okay, we'll get into that in a little bit. Now, one thing Michael Kupris did is he had some contributing critics. He didn't do all the criticizing himself, but he invited 4 gentlemen who were in the CCM Christian music industry in various capacities, some as musicians, some as managers, some as audio techs, just various capacities to get a well-rounded perspective. And also, he wanted to make sure that his opinions of this genre, CCM, was on track, or he wanted to see if he was off base. So he used the opinions of these 4 gentlemen to either validate his existing opinion, or if his opinions were off base, these 4 guys could set him straight. Now, let me tell you about the 4 guys. The first 2, their names, the first guy is named Clayton Ferguson, and the second guy is called Steve Castro. Now, you can Google these guys, and you can get their backgrounds on them, on what they do specifically. The other 2 guys chose to remain anonymous as they gave their input because they are currently working in the business. They did not want to unfairly implicate the artist or the people who were working for the artist. So they remained anonymous, and they had voice actors do their parts so their voices would not be recognized. And they went under pseudonyms. One of them was the name Jack, and the other one was Bob. Now, of the four contributing critics that Michael had on his show, on both of the videos, parts one and parts two, three of them, that's Clayton Ferguson, Steve Castro, and Jack, they all are professing Christians, okay? And of course, when the word Christians is used in both of these videos, they're talking about evangelical Christians in particular. Of course, when you say CCM, you're talking about evangelicals as well, because that's where CCM music came from, is from the evangelical branch of Christianity. Anyway, let me turn off this thing here so you don't hear my um, cell phone go ding ding while I'm doing my presentation here. The fourth guy, his name is Bob. Now, Bob is not a professing Christian, but interestingly enough, of the four guys, the contributing critics, he was probably the most complimentary, if you can believe that. Now, let me go ahead. Okay, let me give you some background about myself, just to give you some perspective here. I am a drummer, and if you've seen any of my drum covers, you'll know that on this channel. I have played in both secular and Christian bands that went out on the road and performed, did ministry, and also I played in Christian praise bands in churches, okay? So I'm not under any grand illusion or any false illusions about evangelical Christians or CCM artists or Christian artists. We are infallible human beings, and anytime you get infallible human beings with egos together, you're going to have problems. And I've had just as many problems in Christian bands as I've had in secular bands. Okay, so Christians are not immune to having problems, and of course, I'd be the last guy that would ever say that evangelical Christians or CCM artists are perfect and without fault. Okay. And yes, there have been times that I've seen or heard of CCM artists not being a good witness for Christ. I've known a few CCM artists that were not the knight in shining armor that we thought they were. But on the other hand, I've known some very class individuals who are CCM artists that are good witnesses. So it's a mixed bag. So I'm not here to defend the behaviors of some of those CCM artists that were talked about on Michael Kupris's two videos. Okay, so yeah, they give some non-flattering stories of a few of the artists. Okay, because they worked with the artists, these four guest contributors. But having said that, let me move on. Now, let me first start out with one housekeeping item that I noticed right away in the video. The first video is entitled Exposing Christian Contemporary Music. And then if you read the description, that's in part one. If you read the description, it says contemporary Christian music. So let me set the record straight right away, right now. CCM stands for Contemporary Christian Music. It doesn't stand for Christian Contemporary Music. And there were times where Michael got the two mixed up. Okay, so sometime in his video he would say contemporary Christian music, then other parts he would say Christian contemporary, and of course in the title he says Christian contemporary, description he says contemporary Christian. Okay, Michael, if you're watching this, get the title straight. If you're going to criticize, if you're going to spend 2 hours and 6 minutes criticizing our genre and carving it up, okay, that's fine. We can take it. At least get the name of our genre right. Okay, CCM stands for Contemporary Christian Music. It's contemporary first, Christian second, music third. Okay, so get that. I mean, that's the least I could expect from someone who has a Bachelor of Science in Communications Media. Okay, now that we've got that off the table, let me move on. Um, one of the things, I don't want to take issue with a lot of what was said and a lot of the observations because in many cases, the majority of cases, I hate to say it, but they're right. It's true. Okay. But one thing I do take exception to in Michael's presentation in both of his videos is his perspective because he really didn't cover the whole of CCM. CCM's been around for 50 years. We have 50 years of history, okay? But he did not cover the entire 50 years. He covered CCM music as it is today, okay? He's covering the last 20 to 25 years of CCM music. He just totally skipped over and ignored the 70s and 80s. Now, one of their contributing uh, critics, Clayton Ferguson, in minute 20 of part one, he did allude to the 70s and 80s of CCM, but it was brief. I mean, like a minute or less, actually. Didn't really delve into a lot of detail. But let me just say this. If you're going to spend 2 hours and 6 minutes carving up CCM, don't you think maybe it wouldn't hurt to spend at least 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes giving a more well-rounded historical perspective of CCM music? Talk about the artist in the 70s and the 80s, talk about Larry Norman, Randy Stonehill, Michael Omartian, Phil Keaggy, second chapter of Acts, Rich Mullins. I mean, come on. I mean, we had some good artists back then, and there's a lot of good things that you could say about CCM music in the initial era. Suppose I did a documentary criticizing rock music, but I never talked about the rock and roll artists of the 50s and 60s. Let's say I never talked about Elvis, Chuck Berry, who else? Jerry Lee Lewis, Dion, Buddy Holly, the Beatles, Rolling Stones. Let's say I did a documentary in rock and roll. I just ignored all those guys. And I just talked about the late 70s and 80s and 90s and talked about punk rock and alternative rock, but didn't talk about the classic rocks back in the 60s and 70s. I mean, wouldn't I be given a very skewed version of rock and roll if I just ignored that? Well, that's basically what Mike Kupris did. Sorry about that. When he's just talking about CCM as it is now, but didn't give you a well-rounded perspective. Okay, now let me move on to the next point. Before I do that, let me wet my whistle here. Thank you for bearing with me. Now, the title of part one is Exposing Christian Contemporary Music, the 7 Deadly Sins. So in the video, Michael actually characterized the 7 deadly sins as our criteria, CCM's criteria, okay? Because that's what he literally said, their criteria. He's going to evaluate our genre of music according to their criteria. He's actually said those words, their criteria. Okay, I take strong exception to that. Now, let me go over the 7 deadlies, okay? Sloth, envy, lust, pride, gluttony, anger, and greed. Now, are those vices or sins? Sure. Those are not good things if you practice or engage in any of those 7 things that I just told you, okay? But you got to understand something. The 7 deadly sins, that is a secular, philosophical, universal construct. That is not a biblical construct. Now, could I take any one of these seven deadlies and look up some scriptures, like, for instance, slothfulness? Okay. Well, you could go in the Bible and find a few scriptures that would condemn slothfulness and encourage you or exhort you to be industrious and work hard. You could, there are, I don't think there's any scriptures that says greed is a sin, but you certainly could find scriptures that say you should be charitable in your giving. Okay. So they would, extol the virtue of that vice, greed, extol the opposite. There are scriptures that tell you that you shouldn't be anger, lust, pride, envy. So those things are bad things, and you could certainly find scriptures to support those things being bad things or being sins. But you can't go to the Bible and open up a passage of scripture, and that passage of scripture would say, these are the seven deadly sins. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, no, it's not going to be there. For evangelicals, our criteria is the Bible. That's our criteria. So, if you want to talk about the Ten Commandments in Exodus 20, where it's listed, very concise, and it's right there. If you want to talk about the seven abominations in Proverbs 16 through 19, or talk about the list of works of the flesh in Galatians 5, yeah, you could do that. They're listed there. They're itemized, but the seven deadlies are not a biblical construct. So if an evangelical ever sees another evangelical acting prideful, let's say, because pride's one of the seven deadlies, well, they wouldn't say, "Hey, brother, you really shouldn't be prideful because that's one of the seven deadlies." An evangelical Christian would never do that. They would say, "Hey, brother, I see some pride in your life, and the Bible really uh, exhorts us not to be proud. And here's some scriptures that talk about pride and being proud." That's how an evangelical would handle that. They'd go directly to the Bible and go to verses in the Bible that talk about pride. They wouldn't go quote the seven deadlies. Okay, you're not going to hear. See, how many times you've ever heard a CCM artist or any evangelical minister of any sort ever tout the seven deadlies? It's very rare that we would ever talk about that because it's not in the Bible, or not, at least it's not concisely presented in the Bible. Cleanliness is next to godliness. It's a good thing to be clean, but that phrase, cleanliness is like next to godliness, that's not in the Bible. God helps who helps those who helps themselves is not in the Bible, but there are people who quote those sayings as if they were. Okay, so the same thing with the seven deadlies. They're not. It's not in Scripture. So yeah. So I wanted to set that record straight, and I think that's a gross oversight on Michael's part, that he didn't really dig down deep enough into the mindset of an evangelical, because the seven deadlies are not even in our wheelhouse. We don't even think about the seven deadlies because we've already got the Bible as our criteria. So I think I've said enough about that. So let me move on. Okay, greed. Now, greed was one of the seven deadlies, and of course, greed. There are scriptures that would admonish you not to be greedy, or there would be scriptures there that would admonish you to be charitable and generous and stuff, yada yada yada. And I remember back in the 70s and 80s, there was a big debate among evangelical Christians about Christian artists and how they do their concerts. Should they charge ticket prices for their concerts, or should they just let everybody in and take up a love offering? We've had that debate, we've had that discussion many times. We've discussed, well, should they be in churches or should they be in concert halls, neutral places? How do you handle that? I know a lot of artists were evaluated by Christians on how well they ministered. In other words, some artists are expected to minister. Like minister means give your testimony, how God has changed your life, how um, maybe give a word of exhortation to the believers there watching your concert to help deepen their walk in faith in Christ. Or if there's unbelievers there, encourage them to become believers. Some of these artists would actually do altar calls. If you want to give your life to Christ, come forward and we'll pray for you, that sort of thing. So some Christian artists were better than others at doing that and having ministry value. There were just some Christian artists that just sang their songs and did very little ministry value. So there was a wide spectrum going on there. And I like a CCM artist called Keith Green. I mean, he was all ministry, but he was a very good musician too. But I've seen other artists that couldn't do what Keith Green does. So it varies. So we've had that discussion. We've had that debate. Now, another issue I want to take up with Michael Kupris on, or rebut, or respond to, is that he takes worship music as we know it today. These are songs that are sang in churches by praise bands, okay? And he makes that like a subgenre of CCM music. He sees CCM music is a part of, or worship music is a part of CCM music. I see those as two separate things, okay? CCM music is its own genre, worship music is its own genre. Now, what he said about worship music, what his guest critics, his four guest critics, said about worship music, how it's mundane, it's redundant, and yada, yada, yada. I don't disagree. I really don't. In fact, I share some of those same observations, but I don't like calling worship music CCM music because I see them as separate deals. And one of their critics named Bob also feels the way I do, where Michael puts them together, okay? But he also criticized CCM artists. He said that he listened to Spotify's top 10 Christian playlist, and he says the artists on this playlist all sound like Americana and Imagine Dragon had a bored baby. That was his exact quotes, okay? And if that's his observation of today's CCM artist, okay, that's his opinion. I respect that. I don't know enough about today's Christian artists to give a differing opinion. I don't listen to CCM today because it's not listenable. It's like I'm more into the classic 70s and 80s. That's my niche, and some early 90s. And Rich Mullins, stuff like that. But yeah, I don't like putting the two, worship music and CCM, together. I don't even like calling worship music worship music. Now, I did a two-part series on what evangelicals will not tell you about worship, but it's on my other YouTube channel called Jackson's Journal. So if you really want to know my attitude about worship, go check out that. And that's why you'll know why I don't like to call worship music worship music. But suffice to say, back in the 70s and 80s, there were very distinct. In fact, back in the 70s and 80s, if you wanted to listen or buy Christian CCM albums, you had to go to a Christian bookstore to do that. Okay, you didn't go to Sound Warehouse or Barnes and Noble or Borders, and it wasn't mixed in with all the other secular genres back then. All right, you had to go to a Christian bookstore, and the Christian bookstore had all their merchandise subdivided. You had your books over here, your trinkets over here, and then your music over here. Then you go into the music section. The music section was subdivided. You had praise and worship in one section, and then you had CCM in the other. So back then there was a definite wall. And basically your praise and worship, or worship music, whatever you want to call it, that's stuff that you sing in church, particularly. Where CCM, you could play that in secular venues, or you can play that in neutral venues where you're not conducting a church service, sort of thing. So that's basically it. So, having said that, I think I pretty much covered all my bases here. Um, so, thank you for watching. Please feel free to comment on what your, please feel free to go to Michael's channel, Become the Night, watch the two videos that I just responded to. The second video was really an extension and an embellishment of the first. They talked about the poor business practices of CCM artists. They talked about how the CCM artist crew, was overworked and underpaid and exploited. And of course, I have some experience with that. I worked in Christian media for 5 years, and I know what it's like to be exploited, overworked, and underpaid. And if you were to complain about it, you were chided for not being a humble servant, and not doing it for the Lord, and been there, done that. So some of the stuff that they said about the gatekeeping, the cultural manipulation, yeah, I've been there, done that. I've witnessed that, and I've witnessed others be manipulated as well. So again, I can't refute those charges because they're true. Yeah, and for the most part, I mean, now you always will have and Mike made it very clear in both of his videos, this does not reflect on all artists, but maybe the majority or some, whatever the case or whatever the issue was. So Mike did try to be fair as he could when he invited those four contributing critics, but I think his perspective was a little skewed. I think a lot of it had to do with his age. My best guess is Mike is a millennial. He was probably born in the late 80s. And, so he's probably never exposed to the early CCM artists or what we did and what went on then. And so he was never exposed. I don't think he ever knew about Keith Green and how Keith Green actually discontinued selling his product, his records in the Christian bookstores. And he told his fans, if you want my music, write my ministry and I'll send you a copy and just enclose a donation for whatever amount you see fit. He never even listed a price for his records. In fact, if you didn't have any money at all, he would have given you the record for free. And he did that because he wanted to be above reproach. He didn't want people to accuse him of being in it for the money. That's why he did that. It would have been nice if Michael had known about that and known about artists. Now, in all fairness, not all CCM artists could have done that because Keith Green had a ministry called Last Days Ministry. He had a staff. He had an army of volunteers, so when the letters of request for their albums, Keith's albums came in, it was Keith's underlings and his employees or his staff that processed those letters that took the check and deposit it in the bank and put the album in the mail and send it to the person. Okay, I doubt very seriously Keith himself ever opened a letter of request and responded. And not all CCM artists have that resource at their disposal to be able to do that. I don't think Michael W. Smith or Sandy Patty or Amy Grant could have done that. Okay. So, but that's what Keith did. He was able to do it. But we had artists like that were very altruistic and very down to earth and some good people. We had some good people. And it's just unfortunate that Michael Kupris doesn't see that side or that side of CCM music as it existed in the 70s and 80s. And I did a 5-part series on the history of CCM. It's on this channel. Just go check it out. And Mike Kupris would have done well to watch that 5-part series when he was doing his research in preparation for the 2 videos that he did. But he didn't, so that's okay. He didn't know about it. My channel's a lot smaller and less well known, so not everybody knows about my 5-part series on the history of CCM, so that's okay. But anyway, thank you for watching. Please feel free to comment down below after you've seen Michael's two-part series. Let me know what you think and give me your input. Share, like, and above all, subscribe. I need some more subs. Anyway, thank you for watching and God bless you.